future, and he's got a few ideas on how to fix it that you might want to listen to very closely. He's Peter Joseph, author of the new book, The Human Rights Movement, Reinventing the Economy to End Oppression. He joined me in the studio for a healthy argument and to clue me into his ideas. Check it out.
Well, the merchant view generally attacks financialization these days because they're privy to the fact that what's happened throughout the evolution of capitalism is the point of trade has been removed from actual exchange of real goods to the trading of effectively pieces of paper and money itself. And as statistics have proven, the financial system, including Wall Street and the financial services sector, have really been hindering the actual Main Street growth and the general population's well-being. And I think that's a realization that will be growing as time moves forward and this insidiousness of financialization becomes better understood.
How would you foresee the right side of the aisle realizing what you say is going to become worse and people are going to have to realize? I mean, what is it going to take for conservatives and business leaders on that side of things to actually realize this and take it on board?
Well, in the broad scheme, and I want to extend the criticism to the entire logic of the market economy, probably the most easy argument is the decline of our environment. Today, all life support systems are in decline because of a consumeristic, consumption-based society. And this isn't some error of human nature and so on. This is the fact that our actual structure requires people to buy and consume at increased rates in order to create jobs. So as long as you have a linkage between jobs and income and the circulation of money and GDP and so on, you really have an unsustainable social system. The system doesn't want to actually solve problems, it wants to service them, such as, say, the medical community. It's not to say the medical community means bad, but their general incentive structure is to service things in hope that more disease is fundamentally created so they can generate more income. Sorry if that sounds cynical, but that's what the structure suggests.
Well, the structure just
the environmental issue is by far the biggest.
Well, but here's the thing.
Of course,
I'm going to push back a little bit on that because, you know, you say that this consumerism pushes this lack of attention to the environment issue, but let's talk about an agrarian economy. In the past, you know, these different kind of economies that have gone on time immemorial. What do you think that this sort of altruistic bend or this look at the economy would actually preserve the environment, that people in these old economies were saying, oh, let's not leach the ground of its nutrients because that would be bad. We're going to try to preserve the environment to push our agenda along. And any of these economies are going to try to push their agenda along regardless. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, let me preface by saying that over the course of time, because of the limits of technology, the limits of what is the foundation of our economic drive and what has improved the standards of living on this planet, we didn't have the capacity during agrarian times to pollute and overconsume and have all of our annual use of resources occur 1/6 through each year, which is what's happening today. So this is what I call an emerging contradiction of capitalism. It's something that really was there all through the early period of its development, going back literally thousands of years, when trade and exchange and specialization existed, as it does today. But there was an incapacity to create the destruction we do today.
Yeah, you're
And that's really why the system is outmoded. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. I just wanted to point out that I don't necessarily think that all of these ways of making money with regard to trade is, you know, going to give humans an altruistic bend on things. I personally don't feel that that really exists within people when it comes to making money. Let's hit more on the domestic product, the gross domestic product side of things. Other measurements, you know, right now our gross domestic product is measured on consumer spending. What about other measurements like private domestic investment, government spending? I mean, how important do you think that is to raising awareness about this and writing about it and talking about how much our GDP is tied to consumer spending?
Well, I take a very macro approach to all of this. So the divisions you see between the public and the private sector in terms of spending, for example, to me are fundamentally the same. When the public sector in the government decides to spend, increase debt, and so on, it does that through engaging the private sector. It just allocates money through a different channel rather than people supporting things. The government is doing the allocation through taxes and so on. So structurally speaking, it's precisely the same thing. In terms of improvement, though, you know, it's been found that 48% of the American public spends beyond their means every single year. And that's a terrible phenomenon. And people say, well, it's just Americans living beyond their means. Actually, it isn't. It's Americans trying to keep up with a system that's fundamentally based on debt. Since money is created out of debt through our central banks and through the bond structures and so on, we have more debt in circulation than we do actual currency, a mathematical fact directly related to how much interest is charged through the banking system, both central and private. There's simply more debt in existence than money, which is why if you look at the statistics of leveraging, and I'm sorry to change the point slightly, but this is important, leveraging, the more that the rich 1% deleverage increases the debt of the general consuming public. In fact, if you think about it, because all the money, the majority of the money that's made, that circulates society is coming through private bank loans. That's mortgages, car loans, and so on. It creates money into existence. That money is the majority of the money, and yet the general public actually extracts the debt from that while that money rises up to the 1%.
Right, but wouldn't you
That's
also,
because of the financialization.
Well, wouldn't you also argue that
Sorry?
a huge amount of, and we talk about this on this show all the time, a huge amount of the people who are dying in old age have an astronomical amount of credit card debt. They want to go to Walmart, they want to spend their money. This seems to be encapsulated by a quote from George W. Bush shortly after 9/11 that he said, the best way to recover our economy, go out and spend. Spend, spend, spend. So it doesn't exactly seem as if these people, don't get me wrong, they're crippled under debt, such as student loans and homes and auto loans. But wouldn't you also argue that this is spending money for it's aspirationally spending money just to get things? Wouldn't you also say that's kind of endemic to our current system?
I would absolutely say it's endemic, but it goes deeper than I think an impulsivity. And I talk about this in the work extensively with respect to the social relationship of consumerism, or I should say property. You know, I didn't have a smartphone for quite some time. The only reason I really got a smartphone was because other folks that were close to me had them, and they raised the bar of the kind of, so what property and materialism and this growth and obsession with new things and gadgets really is a type of social communication.
Well, yeah, we always want
reflex.
more.
So that's why, you know, unfortunately, our values in this culture have been so distorted by the sense that our success is measured by what we own, by how big our house is, by what we can do. And if you don't have those things, poverty effectively is a thing of social exclusion. Poverty is very relative as a term. You have abject poverty, but then you have relative poverty, which is really much more problematic in the long term because it affects the largest number of people. And it creates a psychosocial stress.
Yeah.
It creates all sorts of, it also creates violence. It creates
but also
discord,
you can't deny that
you
can't deny the fact that in other economic structures, whether it's communism, whatever it is, people have always wanted more to look important, to look powerful, to look good. People have always wanted more. You can't just change a system and say people aren't going to want more to look more important.
I would be careful with such assumptions of human nature, because empirically speaking, there are many cultures that go back to Native American cultures that actually have a very different value system. Their value systems were about being in coexistence. Instead of exploiting the land, it was about finding harmony with the land and the natural environment. There's a lot of examples of that. So be careful with that. It's really right. It's a modern phenomenon.
I'm generalizing for an argument. I really appreciate you joining.
I get it.
I really appreciate you joining me on this. Peter Joseph, author of the new book, The New Human Rights Movement, Reinventing the Economy to End Oppression. Thank you. Time now.